Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I'm your host, ObjectivelyDan, and joining me live in the studio today, Shane Isgrig from Atheist Vanguard. Yep. Another show that gets produced out here at the Atheist community of Austin.
Yep, thanks for bringing it up, man.
What's going on, Shane? How are you doing?
Not so much, just chilling. I'm glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Anybody who watches Atheist Vanguard might already recognize me. What we do out there is we go interview people, and usually in San Antonio. We've recently been doing it here in Austin as well. Do some street epistemology, ask people about what they believe and why, and, break down their methodologies in a roundtable discussion after the interview. So.
Yeah, so if you've never catched the videos before, they actually just straight up are on the street, filming themselves, just having conversations with people. How do you, solicit those conversations?
So there are a few ways, but so really what happens is we go out there, and a lot of the time we're doing some activism where we're holding signs and stuff like that. And we have signs that say secular humanism, good without God, keep church and state separate. The people that read the signs and want to come up and talk to you are usually already some of the most interesting people. You get a lot of people that'll yell at you, but they're not really scary or threatening. They usually just yell something and then they keep walking. They're like, if there isn't a God, why do I have eyeballs? And they walk away. But another thing is I'll just kind of ask people walking by if they have a few minutes for an interview about a God they believe in or anything supernatural. Usually we get to gods, but recently I interviewed these two girls that were atheists that believed in karma. I've interviewed a Satanist, just all kinds of awesome people with amazing stories.
So, there's some people that would look at this and would be like, well, this is really weird that you guys are just spending your time, spending your weekends going out and just trying to talk to people about their beliefs. So some would say are you, what's your deal? Are you trying to harass people? What's the idea here?
I have got that a lot. And for me, really what it comes down to is I think that it's good to have conversations with people about what they believe and kind of get them to realize that maybe they haven't really thought about it very much. And it happens a lot in the conversation where someone will say oh, wow, I haven't thought about it that much, or my mind hasn't gotten there. And whenever I hear that, that's basically the goal of what I'm doing. I want to understand where people are coming from. I hate to straw man anybody's belief and then argue about positions they don't actually hold. So I make sure I'm really getting what they authentically believe every time I do it. It's a lot of fun going out there and really getting people to realize that they haven't thought about it,
Yeah, so what's motivating you to go out there every weekend? Is it just the interesting conversations? Is it the hopes that you are going to change people's minds? What's the primary thing there?
The primary thing is to show people that atheists aren't whatever their negative misconceptions are. Because when people have conversations with you and you're a nice person, it's hard to hold the idea that somebody who doesn't believe in a God must be mean, must be rude. They'll be like, I've had a lot of people say wow, you're an atheist and you're not a dick about it. I've had a lot of people say that to me, which makes me think a lot of people are having conversations that might not be very productive. Which I get. I went through that phase of being angry when you first come out as an atheist and all that. But I do hope to, I am planting seeds of doubt. I do hope that sometimes when I interview somebody, they think about it and it does cause them to either lessen their confidence in a belief or maybe lose the belief. I don't expect that, though. I don't expect when I talk to somebody that's what's going to happen, Somebody that's believed in a God for the past 20 years talks to me and in 5 minutes doesn't. I'd like to believe that happens, but not so sure that it does. But it does put that person on their journey because even the most confident believers will tell you that everybody experiences doubts. Very few people will deny that. Now, when people experience doubts, questions that you've asked them are going to be questions that they think about. Points that you've made will be points that they think about. So as long as you're not doing it in a way where you're being rude to the person and triggering this backfire effect where they don't want to listen to you, you go in and you have the attitude of trying to help the person and better understand them and acknowledge that in any case, the mind that gets changed might actually be yours. So,
And so how would you feel if there was a group of Christians who went out on the weekends and were filming their conversations with people with the intent of doing the opposite, like sowing seeds of belief in Christianity. Like, do you think there would be a difference there in kind of what you're doing?
I've seen some people do that actually, and I think if they're being kind,
that's missionary work, kind of. No, you know, like that's really what it is.
I think if they're being kind, then sure, it's fine. As long as people are going out there and they're doing something that's productive, even if you're not changing minds, if you're helping, you know, improve the relations between believers and non-believers, you still did a good thing, even if you didn't make somebody lose a belief or they didn't make you believe.
Yeah.
You know, if we can walk away from the conversation and I understand where you're coming from a little bit better and you understand where I'm coming from a little bit better, then as far as I'm concerned, what I've done has been productive, even if no mind has changed.
It's interesting because, you know, when I started Truth Wanted, I didn't want it to be an atheist-specific branded show. I mean, even though it is a part of the atheist community of Austin, I don't make that like my primary thing. At least I try not to, although it comes up like pretty much every episode. But like, you know, it's hard, I feel like, if you're not already used to talking about these ideas and not already comfortable entering that space to be willing to have those kinds of conversations. So there's a limit to like what I can do here.
Right.
Because I'm here in a studio just talking to whoever decides to call in. You know. And by the way, you can call in tonight live. We will be taking calls here in a second. Just look at the number on the screen.
Yes.
If you're watching this live, we'd love to talk to you. But, you know, the difference between what you're doing is you're actually going out there and you're almost putting the conversation out for people to have. And again, you're not like, you guys have your signs and you're letting people come to you.
Yeah, it's really people that come up to us. And if I ask somebody if they have time for an interview and they say no, I say have a good day. I'm not like, wait, but do you know? Because I've seen missionaries when they're handing out flyers and stuff, and I just tell them I don't believe. And they're like, well, what do you believe? And then they won't leave me alone.
So like, you know,
don't do that.
This idea of like, let's call it atheist activism, maybe.
Yes.
I mean, that's one way to put it.
That's what
maybe,
it is.
For what you're doing, right? It's like, you know, a few years ago that would have like struck a nerve in me. It's like, oh, what do these people think they're doing?
Right.
But then I just realized, you know, like that's activism in general, isn't it? Just having a stand out there and talking about your ideas and stuff. But for some reason, when it comes to atheist stuff, I think people tend to turn away a little bit.
Well, a lot of people think that you want to take their source of comfort away, you know?
Yeah.
Their God is their source of comfort. You want to lessen their belief in their God. Therefore, you want to lessen the source of comfort. That's how they see it, you know? I think that, you know, like Christopher Hitchens said, follow the truth much more. You know, think for yourself, much more truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way. I think there's plenty to take comfort in the truth. To me, truth is what truth matters, you know?
And you think you have the truth, Shane?
I think I am aware of many truths. I think that I believe some things that aren't true, and I'd like to lose those beliefs.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, you're on the right place. This is Truth Wanted, folks. For those of you joining in the first time, this is a call-in show where we talk about what people believe and why. So if you have a belief that you want to talk about with us, please just go ahead, call that number. We're happy to talk about it. We range the whole gamut of beliefs here. I mean, we don't just talk about religion. We like to talk about science. We like to talk about not science.
Not science. Pseudoscience.
Pseudoscience, if you were.
That's a thing.
You know, just any, so I was reading.
Flat Earthers.
I was at the bookstore today. I was trying to get some Christmas gifts. I ended up buying some stuff for myself, but you saw this. This was on the group chat that we're both in. There was this book of this guy saying, you know, if you meditate enough, you can actually change your genetic expression, like your genes. Like you know how like there's in each generation, like some genes are expressed more than others for different, like, you know, little types of stuff. And this guy was saying through meditation, you could actually, I guess, channel specific genes to, and this book was like right next to like the Richard Dawkins book.
Oh, wow.
It was really interesting. It's just like, like there's still ideas and things out there that like I feel like need to be challenged or at least need to be looked at more critically. You know?
There's a lot of bullshit out there, and religion is not explicitly what's out there. I do think it tends to be the icing on the cake, but no, there's a lot of false beliefs that people hold. I mean, how many people do you see post astrology, stuff every day on Facebook? And it's like, really, if you read somebody their horoscope and it's someone else's zodiac, they're not going to know. Any of them that you read, if you're expecting that to be you, you're going to read it and you go, yes, that happens to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's not great. So this week and next week are going to be the last 2 episodes of Truth Wanted for this year. We're kind of doing a little season break here for the holidays. And as you guys have known, those of you who watch the show, we've had a bit of a bump in subscribers lately ever since I made a little appearance on Atheist Experience. We actually kind of doubled in our numbers. So last time I checked, as of the show, we're at 9.65 thousand subscribers.
That's great.
So as a Christmas gift to me, I would love it if we could get to 10,000 before the end of the year, just because we are so super close. Next week, we're going to have Jamie Boone on with us, and it's going to be a Friday the 13th episode. So it's going to be a nice one to end it on. And then, like I said, we're going to take a break for the rest of the year. And right now, we have plans to come back on January 3rd. So look forward to that, those of you who are wondering, hey, why the heck are we, what's going on? It's a Friday night. Because there was some confusion apparently last week, even though we did announce that we were going to take a break for Thanksgiving. I did get some emails asking, hey, where's the show at? So yes, we're taking a break at this next show date. So next one will be the last one for the year. So look forward to that. Otherwise, things have been going pretty awesome here at the Atheist Community of Austin. You see, we got some of our nice plastic fruit up for our Friendsgiving thing we had a little while ago. I was like, let's keep it for today. It looks kind of nice because we didn't get to, do a Thanksgiving-themed episode.
Thank you, everyone who brought food. I came over here the day after and took most of the leftovers home.
Yeah,
so I had plenty of the food, even though I wasn't here for the party. Just food,
so the building,
isn't it?
We had our own, Friendsgiving. If you don't know, it's just a thing where we just all came together and brought food. I wasn't able to go. I
wasn't either.
Family,
I went.
Yeah, but for those who are here, I heard it was a fun time.
Oh, yeah.
Get to miss out on. So, all right, well, I think it's about time that we should get to the calls. Oh, and by the way, if you are watching live, we will be tuning into Discord afterwards to talk to you guys and answer some questions. So if you don't know where that's at, go look at the link in the description for the Discord, or I'm sure somebody will also post it in the chat for us. So are you ready to get to some calls?
I am ready.
All right, cool. I want to go to Jay in Texas. Jay, you are on the air for Truth Wanted. What is up?
Hey, good morning.
Good morning to you,
How's
Jay.
it going, man?
It's evening here. I don't know where you're at, but it's around 7 o'clock here in the Central Texas area.
Yep.
Oh, I'm not too far from you.
Okay.
It's a good morning. It's easy to remember, and it always gets a laugh.
All right.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'll take it, Jay.
Works for us.
So I see that you want to talk about Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon. What specifically did you want to talk about with that?
Yeah, so I'm, just to set the table here, I am an ex-Mormon, so yay for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yay! Good for you.
I thought you were going to be a current Mormon. I was like, okay, this should be interesting. No. I'm surprised you're not calling from Utah. Okay.
Well, I did live in Utah.
Okay, when you were a Mormon?
When I was a Mormon. I grew up in the cult. I didn't know any different, so I thought it was the one true church. Yeah. And then eyes were opened, and I'm not a Mormon anymore.
Well, happy for you for that.
Yeah. So what about Joseph Smith and how he translated the book? Because that's what I see specifically here. You want to talk about the method of what he did, which is not a not a legit one at all, right?
It's not even close.
Yeah.
So let's pretend that he actually did the Book of Mormon, which he didn't. But I mean, he wrote it, but he didn't get it from God. But let's pretend he did.
Okay.
Right? That's what the Mormon Church teaches.
Right.
And the whole time growing up, they teach you that he sat down and turned each leaf and read the words in the Reformed Egyptian. I'm doing the quote marks with my hand. That's a fake language. And wrote it down. And then, or said the words and then the scribe wrote it down. But if you look in the history, the Joseph Smith Papers, which the church pushes, it's josephsmithpapers.org. So you can go look at the original text. There's not one place in there where it says Joseph Smith looked at the plate. The whole time, it always talks about that stone in the hat, which we all know, right? We hear that a lot, that he read the stone in the hat. But there's another piece to that they still don't talk about. And that part is that he read word from word off of the stone, and that the words did not disappear off of the stone until the text was correct by the scribe.
Ooh.
So then that leads me to question one, why did they change the text? Was the rock wrong? Was God wrong? Or did Joseph Smith make it up? We all know the right answer.
There are plenty of possibilities for something to be translated wrong, right? I mean, somebody can mistranslate intentionally, to deceive you, but you also have to consider that sometimes when people translate, they could make errors, so...
Yeah, so, I didn't know much about the history of the actual text until I talked to Brian Blankenagel from the Naked Mormonism podcast. He actually got to be on this show early on when we were first getting started here. And growing up outside of the history of that, because I understand, like, that's like a story that's told to Mormons as far as the translation goes. That's a cultural kind of story that's passed on, and that means something more to a Mormon than it would for me. Coming up as an outsider and hearing that, it's just like that's just total bullshit. But
yeah.
I didn't grow up with that.
Everyone's bullshit is obviously bullshit to somebody else.
Yeah, and it's like with his story in particular, it's like, okay, so there were these plates that nobody has ever actually accessed except for some witnesses supposedly that signed a document that some of them later recanted on, right? And it's just like it's kind of crazy. It's like
if you go back and look at what the witnesses actually said, not one of them saw the plates. They said they saw them with their spiritual eyes.
Right. Yeah, they saw visions of it.
Spiritual eyes?
Yes. Yeah, I remember hearing about this too. And it's just like, okay, but these are obviously specific details that you have to like critically look into the history of. If you're hearing this story for the first time and someone is orally presenting this to you in church,
this is the first time I've heard spiritual eyes. I think my spiritual eyes have glaucoma.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you need to get that checked out.
Yeah.
There's some chakras stuff we could look at.
Yeah, we got to look into this. I need to get my chakras aligned.
Exactly. But anyway, obviously to do that, to even approach it with a critical mindset is to go against kind of everything you've known and everything you've grown up and the people around you. And I can see why that's hard for folks.
Oh, totally.
But yeah, I don't know. It's not convincing to me at all. It's not convincing to me at all. And to be fair, I've never really talked to any Mormon apologists on this show.
To be fair, I don't think I have either.
Yeah.
The only Mormons that I talk to are the people that come to my door, and as soon as they realize I've read a good deal of the Bible and have questions, they pretty much leave. So
that's another thing too. We don't have a whole lot of Mormons here.
Yeah, I get it.
We got some in the Austin
There are
area,
a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses in the area, but there aren't a lot of Mormons.
But anyway, it is interesting, Jay, just to talk about, like what exactly he really did as far as like the book itself, because it's almost, the book is written like, it's trying to be like Old English almost, which is like, even more bizarre because, that's not how.
He mimicked the Bible, the King James Version of the Bible. So if you look at the King James Version and the Book of Mormon, it's written very similar. And then the War of 1812 book, it's kind of mimicked like that. So if you read that one, you'll find a lot of very similar passages. They're not identical, but they're very, very similar. So that him and I think it was Oliver Cowdery were the two who actually wrote the Book of Mormon. You can see that they're using the same kind of concepts. But I think it's just interesting that the Mormon Church teaches one thing, but in their actual documents is a completely different way that Book of Mormon was. I mean, supposedly.
A lot of Christianity does that too.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, we'll say one thing, and then the Bible actually says something else.
Completely different. So
that's not too uncommon, it turns out.
But as for me, I think that it comes as no surprise that somebody who's writing a book and trying to convey that this is a written word of God would speak in a way similar to their understanding of how God talks. So if your understanding of how God talks is the King James Version of the Bible, and you say, I talked to God, he said, you would make God sound like someone who spoke Old English because your understanding of God is someone who's speaking in Old English.
Well, I think that is mostly like, the copying, like you said, the King James text of the time, which is kind of this Old English kind of text. And so you want your translation to reflect that of this other authoritative source. I think
to you, God says thou and thy. Like God doesn't say Yeah.
Yeah, it says it in the original Egyptian, Shane. You just got to translate it. So,
The Reformed Egyptian.
The Reformed Egyptian, that's right. Well, yeah, Jay, I'm again glad that you're ex-Mormon now. What was it that got you out of it? Was it this specific fact about the Book of Mormon that kind of triggered it for you, and that's why you wanted to talk about it, or was it something else?
No, that's just something I've been digging into, and I'm actually going to be doing a whole thing on the Book of Mormon and how there's moral issues with the whole storyline.
Okay.
But that's something else. But to get me out was more that, so the Mormon church used to, before they did 2 hours, they had 3 hours church. And they have sacrament, which is where everybody meets. And then they have Sunday school, which is where the men and women meet together. And then the youth go someplace else. And then they have a third session, which is where the men separate from the women and they each get their own instruction.
Okay.
Well, during this men's section, they would talk about treating your wives kindly and being nice to them, which is good, right? You want to treat your wife kindly.
Mm-hmm.
But then the very next words out of their mouth would be like, for Mother's Day, you need to do the dishes and make dinner. I'm like, wait, how is that treating your wife nicely?
Letting her do your dishes?
That stuff all the time anyway. It's a partnership, not a, wife does the work. And sometimes they would say, buy a vacuum for Christmas. I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
That is just why would you do? So that's what started me saying, this isn't right.
I just can't imagine thinking that, like, I love you so much that I will let you clean up after me.
Yeah.
I don't know what that mindset would be like.
I do. I used to be in that mindset.
You used
to. Me. Yeah.
I'm glad you came out of it, man. That is interesting to hear.
By the way, I want to correct myself. I'm pretty sure I said
Okay.
Brian Blankenagel earlier, and I'm realizing, no, it's Bryce, which is really awkward because I know him, and I haven't talked to him in a while. But yeah, it is Bryce Blankenagel for those of you who want to look up the Naked Mormonism podcast. But I don't know why I said Brian.
Can I ask, did I hear you correctly? Did you say you were writing a book about this?
No, I'm going through the Book of Mormon and finding out the
I wanted to make sure.
There's a piece in there where someone who, one of the very first characters in the book, Nephi, he kills a guy who is drunk. He chops off his head while he is drunk and incapacitated and on the ground. Why is that in the book? Why did Joseph Smith add that piece to the book? So I'm not looking at it from a religious point of view. I'm looking at it from a moral. Why would someone do this?
Well, was it relevant to the story?
It wouldn't be the first time that stories like that appear in biblical texts as well.
Right.
I mean, the part that they don't tell you about in Sunday school with David and Goliath is that David is carrying around Goliath's head after he cuts it off when he's done. You know what I mean? Like it's the books are always been gory.
There are a lot of things they didn't tell me in Bible school.
Yeah,
actually.
and so
that triggered me for Matt Dillahunty. I watched his atheist. I can't remember the atheist debates or something.
Okay.
And he went through one of the stories in the Bible and was talking about how immoral that story is and how terrible it is. I thought, well, crap, there's a whole bunch of those in the Book of Mormon.
Oh, yeah.
Right. He's doing that.
Yeah.
I thought, I'll just do it for the Book of Mormon since I know the Book of Mormon inside and out. I've read it 5, 6, 10 times. So
just remember when criticizing these ideas that when you're criticizing the morality and you're criticizing the rationality, to do so separately. Like, make sure you distinguish that, because something being immoral has nothing to do with whether or not it's rational or true. So just make sure that you make that distinction as you're making your criticism.
That's true. And, because people talk to us, and the most common defense with a lot of the stuff where we're talking about, this kind of awful looking stuff in the Bible is, well, there's a context to it, the time and place and the culture was different. And that's kind of that's the first thing you're taught as a Christian. If you're really seriously looking at this stuff, as well, there's reasons and explanations for all of this stuff, even if those reasons and explanations aren't particularly.
God has his reasons. Works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, it does, even if they don't work out for very good.
So you're kind of explaining about how slavery in the Bible is immoral, but people justify it because God said it was okay back then.
That's right.
And they also give the defense that it's a different kind of slavery.
Yeah.
Get ready for that defense.
Yes.
Their argument is that they're referring to like indentured servanthood.
Right.
And,
Or they'll say oh, it's just like the NBA has people under contract.
Right. So you have to keep in mind that if Dan owes me money, I don't consider him my property until he pays me back. That's not how that works.
Yeah.
He might owe me money, but he doesn't belong to me, and I certainly can't beat him to death as long as it takes over a day for him to die.
Yeah, and I didn't invade Shane's village. And even if I did, that doesn't make him, my slave either,
right?
Because he's the leftover from that. So that's some of the stuff that you'll see if you look at some of that. But
yeah,
I want to end this with this, Jay, because I think no matter what Shane and I ever say about Mormonism, or if we talk about Jehovah's Witnesses or anything like that, we could talk about these groups all day, but it's not going to be as poignant as whatever you have to say, Jay, because you grew up in it, and now as someone leaving that, like, your voice is going to be more powerful for people to listen to because it's easy for us on the outside.
Yes, I do have a question before we get going, Jay. Yeah. Could I ask you, did you ever reach the point where they gave you the magic Mormon underwear? Because I hear that's a thing.
It is. I can tell you anything you want to know about the temple.
Did you get it? Did they give you the...
I did.
Wow.
I did. I was in there. I did all the signs, the tokens.
And it's supposed to be, when you're in there, it's supposed to be a secret that there's like a magic underwear.
Well,
right?
They don't call it magic underwear. They call it sacred.
Sacred. Yeah, okay, but it's a secret to people that aren't Mormon, right? Okay.
Yeah. You're supposed to keep them covered and not let anybody see them, and don't talk about them.
As with most underwear.
Just before I did the temple thing, they used to have the part where you had to slit your throat. Well, you didn't. You just motioned it.
Okay.
But if you told anybody, that you would have to kill yourself. But they removed that from the temple.
What? Fuck.
As violent. Oh, yeah. There's lots of stuff about the Mormons.
That is so toxic.
So here's the thing about the temple stuff, because a lot of that, some of that's been leaked already on YouTube. A lot of those, the rituals and stuff that they do.
That is one of the most toxic Mormon ideas, if not the most.
Yeah.
Wow.
But if you look at those rituals, it looks like 90% of it is just really boring. It's just like a bunch of people.
Boring.
Yeah, a bunch of people in white clothes just moving around doing stuff. But then there's like those little bits.
Start to go through what those motions actually mean.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's some of those motions. So if you see a person holding their hand, I can't remember which hand it is. One hand is up, facing up, and one hand is facing down, and the thumb is out. And then you do a motion across your body. That they don't tell you this in the temple specifically, but they used to. It's a previous history thing. That was cutting your bowels because you gave up the token. That's your penalty if you give up that token.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Man.
So there's a lot of gruesomeness in there.
So a lot of coercion via violence is what that sounds to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Okay. Because, Shane, if we really think this is true, we should make sure you really know by putting this knife up to your throat, and you're going to say it's true to people or else I'm going to kill you. Right?
That's because God, that's another reason why I'm doing the Book of Mormon thing too, is if there's a lot of veiled threats in the Book of Mormon, and definitely the Doctrine and Covenants, which is another book of Mormon Jews, that if you don't do something, God will punish you. And so it fits with the Mormon temples that if you don't do something, God is going to punish you. So that's everywhere. I mean, Joseph Smith had it tons of times where one is he used a flaming sword to threaten women to have sex with them, because if they didn't, then God was going to kill him with the flaming sword.
Holy shit.
So
that's crazy.
It's everywhere in there.
To think that someone could believe that is...
Well, if you're a follower, I could see it happening, right?
Yeah. Imagine putting that in your Tinder bio.
Yeah, if you don't have sex with me, God's going to kill you.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know how that would work out today.
No, I think you have to be in a certain state of suggestibility to consider.
Yeah, I can't imagine that working, not only on Tinder, in any situation where you're like, hey, if you don't have sex with me, God's gonna do this.
Well, if you think you're talking to the prophet of God on earth,
well, yeah, you know what? There are plenty of people that would. So
then you have that power over people, I guess. But Jay, we do have to get to the other calls here. But thanks so much for telling us your story.
Thank you a lot,
and thanks for calling into the show this week.
You're welcome. We'll talk to you later.
All right. See you later, Jay.
Later.
Yeah, man. Like I was saying, I wanted to close it out was that we could talk about this stuff all day, but again, Jay's voice is going to matter more than our voice in this because.
I don't have experience as a Mormon.
Well,
so.
it's just it's going to be more it's going to be more convincing to me for someone who has left the beliefs, because they just are usually going to know more about it. That's not going to be true in every single circumstance, right? But like, you know, it's going to speak to people who have already grew up with that as well. Yeah. You know, because I'm a never-mo, right? Like, I talked to there's an ex-Mormon group that meets here in Austin, and I hung out with them one time, and the way they talked about being in Mormonism, they talked about almost like being in the military, like coming back from war or something. You know, there's the stories that they told, but there's also like a camaraderie there in the experiences of just being part of the same kind of culture and community for so long and leaving it, that they can relate to certain things that I would just never be able to relate to. Yeah. You know, which makes the communication on that issue a lot harder. Right. Mm-hmm. So, ex-Mos and ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and ex-everybody's, you know, raise your voices because you're important.
It is. And I'm glad to know that there's like a specifically like ex-Mormon group, you know, because people here at the atheist community, you might realize when you left the same denomination that someone else is, you have this kind of bond. Like we're both ex-Catholics kind of thing, you know, like we both know what this process is like. Mm-hmm. You know, so. Yeah,
for sure. Folks, we have open lines here, so just want to let you know, if you want to call in, we still have some open spaces, so please do.
Tell us about your God.
Yeah, until then, I want to get to Aaron here in North Carolina. Aaron, what is going on?
Hey, what's up, man?
What do you want?
Hey, Aaron, we can hear you now, I think. Get a little bit of background noise.
Yeah, are you on, do you have us on speakerphone right now or something?
Yeah, a little bit.
Could you? Okay, I could hear you a little bit better now. If you would be able to take us off speaker, could you do that?
Is this better?
Yeah, if you're moving around or if there's noise in the background, if you could just minimize that as much as possible.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
That's a lot better.
Much better.
Yeah.
All right, Aaron, what you want to talk to us about today?
Do you remember the guy that called in like 2 weeks ago about the unspoken written code? You guys kind of didn't really understand what he was saying, I don't think.
Unspoken written code, was he talking about like DNA?
Yes.
Yeah, I do. You know, I get a lot of interesting calls about DNA and stuff, but I think I know the one that you're talking about in particular. Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you understand how that relates at all to like the idea of there being a God?
So the idea being that DNA is like a code, and the code is kind of created by God. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, he was telling you how it's like a language, and you were like, "Well, we've never seen like letters in there." That's kind of like how you guys poked fun at it.
Well, it's similar to the watchmaker argument, right? I mean, somebody sees order, and they have examples of things being ordered, and in most cases, they're designed. So they see the human DNA or whatever is being ordered, and they think that therefore it must also have a designer.
Right.
Right. That's probably the logic being used there.
Mm-hmm.
It's close. It's like Lawrence Krauss, when he was confronted with the idea of like intelligence being the designer of DNA, he like referenced the snowflake and how like they appear to be designed, but they're not.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you have information that meets an even higher standard, when it's coded information that can be decoded and used to complete a task, it's a lot more complex than a snowflake. And it actually implies a human mind or some advanced intelligence was involved.
So I agree with you that DNA as a whole is more complicated than snowflakes.
Yes,
right, by pretty much most metrics.
Agree with that premise.
Yes, but like to say that it implies a design, that's I think.
I don't think so. Are you in agreement that this implies design? Is this your belief?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so
it's like, because I know like when you tried to, what are you guys' names again? I'm sorry.
My name is ObjectivelyDan.
And I'm Shane.
Yeah.
Dan and Shane. Shane, you're doing like the 4-minute interviews on YouTube, right?
Yeah, on Atheist Vanguard.
But you're not the Cordial Curiosity.
Nope, Cordial Curiosity, that's Reed Nicewonder that does those videos. Who has also been a guest on this show. Awesome. I should get him back on.
I started watching both of them like last week. But anyway, back on track here. So yeah, like when he was saying like when Dan was saying it's not a language. It's like when Bill Gates compared DNA to computer code. I have it in like 3 stages. Like if you have a book, that could be like level 1. If you have a laptop, and it's just bits of ones and zeros, but it obviously is still communicating like tons of information. So that'd be level 2. And then when you can do it with chemicals, when you can take just chemicals and then the chemicals know how to interact with each other and talk with each other, and you end up with like a rabbit or a human, that's like level 3. That's why Bill Gates said this is like DNA is like a higher version of anything we've ever made with computers.
So, to say that DNA is like a code is, you can definitely make that comparison. I mean, it is. There's an exchange of information and processes and tasks are carried out from DNA, right? And so the analogy is there. But, the difference is you said that the code, well, I'm trying to remember your specific word, but, it's not self-aware in what it's doing. Like, computer code doesn't know that it's computer code itself. It's not like doing things because it doesn't have a mind to it. And and the thing is, like, we're setting up the processes that happen with computer code, that the actual reactions there are different with DNA molecules. DNA molecules will go out and do things on their own, without any intervention of humans or otherwise. It's because of the actual molecules in place and the chemical reactions that are happening in those environments that allows them to happen. It's really the environments that's guiding these things, and not necessarily a programmer. And we can show this in different environments how DNA is changed to match different places.
Yeah, and I'm entirely agreeing with you that it's very complex. The problem is when we say that because something is complex that it implies a God. If we say that something is complex,
absolutely. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to make a distinction between those two. Like complexity, like if you go cut down a tree, you can find like complexity in the rings, and it's like some semblance of information. But there was like a panel of like doctors that got together and they formed like a definition of surrounding like higher levels of information, and they basically just inferred that the definition they came up with is when you have when you have code that can be decoded and used to complete a task, like a simple recipe or like a DNA strand that builds an animal. If you have either one of those, that's like a new standard of like information. And we've never seen that standard of information.
So a lot of these
place without a mind and intelligence behind it.
So a lot of these codes relating to DNA are more constructs that we assign as labels to things that already exist. Sort of like we have labels for chemicals. They exist without our labels, but, our DNA, we're able to label it in complex enough ways that we, in your words, code it, but that doesn't imply that it was actually designed by something.
Well, that and just, I don't know, like if you're saying that we've never seen these things without a mind, and it's like, well, that's kind of, that you're kind of going in a circle there a little bit because you're kind of proving your own point. You're kind of saying like, oh, well, this has to be a mind because we've never seen anything like it unless, human beings have designed stuff. And it's like, well, like, but we've already got these processes happening and they've been happening for long periods of time. And I've never seen a God actually design things either. I haven't seen that happen either.
That's part of the problem with this form of reasoning. I don't have anything to compare, like, when people use the watchmaker or, a painter argument, I have examples of paintings being painted. I've seen how paintings are made. So, yes, if I stumble across a painting, I will assume a painter. I don't have an example of somebody designing a person.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything to contrast it to.
Well, they wrote about it in the Bible. That counts, right? That counts for something.
They wrote about DNA in the Bible?
No, about humans being designed.
Okay.
Well, that's people writing about people, though.
A claim.
Yeah.
That's not an exclusive to the Bible.
Like when people say like, oh, the Bible's like a Spider-Man comic book that proves Spider-Man, if you're going to go with the Bible proving God. But yet, the Bible had like information about science that humans didn't know for thousands of years.
What's an example about information?
Could you give me an example?
Yeah.
Of something they got right.
They mentioned that there were mountains on the ocean floor a couple thousand years before we ever knew that was a fact. They mentioned that air has weight long before we ever knew that. They knew that blood was important to life, but we were bleeding people in like the 1800s because we thought, that was
it's not hard to figure out that blood's important to life, though, is it?
Yeah, I don't know.
But yet, like George Washington, like died from that thought that you could bleed yourself and rid yourself of a disease.
Wait, hold. Well, are you saying that they didn't do bloodletting rituals back in that the Jews weren't doing any of that? Because they definitely were doing some crazy stuff.
Absolutely not saying that.
They were definitely doing some crazy stuff with their blood.
Said that life was in the blood, and we didn't figure that out until
but wait, can I ask you something, Aaron?
Yeah.
If I write a book and make some predictions, and some of them happen to be true, does that mean that I was inspired by God, or does it mean that I got something right?
Oh, it definitely just means you got something right. But,
right. So how do we? Why does that argument not support the claim that my book was divinely inspired, but it supports that claim for yours?
Well, I would have to see your book. I'd have to see, events from the past, events from the future.
Well, no, not really, because you've already agreed with me that the fact that I predict something or make a guess about something, and what I predict or guess about happens to be true, that wouldn't prove that my book was divinely inspired. Yet you're using that exact argument for the Bible. Okay, but why does the argument only work for your book and not mine?
I'm not saying it only works for my book. I'm just saying, when people are just comparing it to a Spider-Man comic book, and they're just leaving out the fact that it got 10 or 15 things right.
Yeah, well, you know what?
Science,
if we want to talk about
an invalid comparison.
Okay, well, if you want to say that, in comparison to the Bible versus a Spider-Man comic, what made more predictions that came true? I wouldn't be too surprised if there were more things in the Bible, because Spider-Man isn't really a comic about making predictions about the future, right? It's sort of just a comic.
But here's the other thing, too, because if we're talking about stuff that the Bible's gotten right, I know for a fact that there's parts of the Bible that says if you break the neck of a bird and spread the blood around your house, that'll protect you for things, or that the sun stood still for an hour,
right?
Or that, that a creation was happening at specific days, and that the time frame of the when the Earth was created doesn't match our scientific understanding of how the Earth was created at all.
Well,
so there's all kinds of things you can look at.
Another objection I have is what if you see something that the Bible predicts and it doesn't get around to happening? What if somewhere in the Bible it's claimed that Jesus will come back within the lifetime of his disciples, and his disciples die and he never comes back? Wouldn't that
sounds like a misinterpretation to me?
And how do we get there? What makes you reach this conclusion that it's a misinterpretation? Or, it doesn't have to be that exact claim. What I'm saying is, if you see something predicted in the Bible and it just doesn't happen, how does that not work the other way around?
Well, for me, I'm already, I don't want to say I've already reached my conclusion. I'm not ever going to change it. But I do have, a framework in motion that's already been working for me, answered prayers, seeing prophecy in the Bible, understanding that the Big Bang points to the supernatural realm. And, there's a ton of things that support my belief in God, my belief in Jesus, and my belief in the Bible. So, if I see this prophecy didn't work out, it's far more likely, in my opinion, that I'm not interpreting that specific chapter right. It simply hasn't happened yet.
Why is your conclusion that...
Right. It sounds like if the Bible doesn't say what you want it to, you assume that it's a misinterpretation. Do you think that might be...
Not at all. The Bible says plenty of things I'd rather it not say, but that's not going to take me from my position.
Why is the first...
analyzed, the multiverse...
Right, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is...
So this creator, and I've decided this one is the most logical...
It sounds like if the Bible makes a claim and you discover that the claim isn't true, your conclusion immediately becomes that you misinterpreted the claim. Why not? Why isn't it plausible that the claim is just false?
The claim could be false, but I think it would be far more likely that the book that's predicting things from the future, from 6,000 years into the future, and, it's 2,000 years ahead of science. If that book is right on, these other 15 things, I'm probably misreading whatever I'm reading.
So in the Bible...
I used to think the Bible was just a collection of stories from old people that wanted me to become a good person. So I started seeing correlations between reality and the Bible, and I was like, wow, this is all real shit.
Can I ask you this, Aaron? Do you think that a human being could survive in the stomach of a whale for a few days? If the Bible said that if someone went in the stomach of a whale, that they could basically use it as
3 days.
Right. Do you think that
sounds pretty silly, right?
Yes.
Sounds pretty silly when you say you throw a rod, it becomes a snake. A donkey talk to you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yes, it does.
It's like silly and very easy to mock, and I get that.
Right.
But when you introduce a being that created a universe and created our DNA, and the DNA builds humans on its own on a regular basis, you know, if you introduce a God that can do anything,
right.
all those little stories.
Well, when you introduce a God that can do anything,
omnipotence, everything becomes plausible to you. That's the problem.
Like, whatever.
That's exactly what I'm saying with theism is anything is plausible to you because you think that there is a being that can do anything. And what I'm saying is not everything
the only thing you have to do is prove that being exists. Then everything becomes, you know, it's in the tub. It's a wall.
Awesome. And people have been trying for thousands of years, and here we are still asking.
Well,
we don't have any.
All you do is take a good hard look at the double slit experiment and a good hard look at the Big Bang.
I'm sorry, at which experiment?
You said the double slit experiment. The one with about quantum physics, you know?
Okay.
Yeah. The idea that it's about quantum superposition and stuff. Yeah. But
it's about how human consciousness.
Here's the thing, though. Did the ancient Israelites, were they able to look at the Big Bang and the quantum slit experiment? So, like, what were they using to understand that God was real?
Well, they had miracles on a day-to-day basis.
But not everybody had miracles back then. But hold on, not everybody. There are periods of time within the Bible where no miracles occurred, and it even says it, right? Even before Jesus' coming and after in the last kind of books that chronicle stuff, you know, they specifically mention, and these were times where God was silent. You know, there were no miracles that occurred.
Even God rested after the seventh day.
Yeah. So there were definitely times.
Stronger than mine.
So you know, if you're an ancient Israelite and you're trying to figure out whether or not this whole God thing is real, what do? You
had faith. You just believed.
Okay.
And I used to do that when I was little, and I started to doubt myself because this lady like started screaming and fell out in the middle of the church. My mom had me in like a 4-person church instead of the 100-person church that I was used to. So like the groupthink environment had dissolved, and I was just looking at this lady like thinking critically, and I was like, I don't really feel anything in my heart at all. So why is she on the floor and screaming about the Holy Spirit? And that's when I decided to just research everything from like quantum mechanics to entropy, DNA, the laws of information, the cosmological microwave background radiation that points to the Earth being in the center of the universe and all that stuff.
Whoa!
Wow, it's pretty easy to believe in God once you have all the information, but you just got to go get it.
I think it's easy to believe in God when you use the information to point it to specific beliefs.
Well, when you you already
PhDs saying like the mapping of the universe is radiation from the Big Bang.
What do you think
on its axis?
Listen,
pretty
these
amazing.
PhDs that you're quoting right now, right? You're talking about like Sean Carroll and stuff. I mean, Lawrence Krauss. You know, these guys aren't Christian, right? Like they don't come to. Why aren't the people who are studying this, the people who know more about this than you or I combined? Why aren't they Christian? I think Lawrence Krauss probably knows a bit more about physics than you or I, right? Like,
I mean, I debated him on Twitter. I kind of slapped him, so.
Okay.
All right. Well, I can't be a referee on your Twitter debates with Lawrence Krauss on Twitter.
I don't get to be the arbiter of who won between you and Lawrence Krauss. I mean,
when you're writing books that say a universe from nothing, I mean, you're already proving you have some sort of like mental handicap. So.
That's a whole specific discussion that I don't even want to do on this show. But
you said that God can do anything, and then you basically told us that anything that happens is proof of God. So if anything that happens is proof, okay, I'm sorry. I was saying that it was implied.
It was the idea that anything can happen because God can do anything.
Right.
So if we're looking at the Bible and we can justify anything through this, how can we justify?
So you're admitting nothing would disprove it, is my point.
We can't disprove.
And if
anything.
I can't disprove something,
the thing is, you can't be coming through the Bible and saying like, oh, this thing talked. Well, yeah, of course, because they have an omnipotent being on their side. The only way to really attack Christianity is to attack God at the source. Like, is God real or not? That's the crux of the position.
Well,
so it's like, it's not about, well, did he survive in the whale for 3 days? Did the donkey really talk? None of that shit really matters. What matters is God real? Like, if God's real, then obviously all that shit can happen easy. Right now, it can happen right now.
I suppose, but like, we can't even get God to do anything on the show right now. I mean, like, I
know we can't.
I've invited him to be a guest on Atheist Vanguard, and he hasn't responded.
I've asked him to call in too.
So why doesn't God? I mean, on an atheist show.
you know, whether or not God decides to do things at specific times, you know, that's another thing entirely. But, you know, like I see some of the stuff that you're looking at, right? I look at the Big Bang and I'm looking at cosmic background radiation and stuff. And like my brain isn't pointing to God through that. In fact, if anything, when I'm looking at that stuff, I see the opposite from Christianity, because there's no Christian text that I'm aware of that talks about cosmic microwave background radiation, or, you know, the actual, what the Big Bang actually describes. And here's the thing that's been really annoying me the past couple of weeks. Let me talk, and I'll let you get your word in here in a bit, Aaron. But the thing that's really been annoying me in the past couple of weeks with people who calling in is saying that, yeah, the Bible describes the Big Bang. No, it does not. There is nothing in that text that describes the Big Bang. You know what it says? It says there's creation, right? And it happens over the period of course of days. And you know what? The order in which the things are happening isn't even the order in which, you know, the science says that stuff is happening. It's saying that, you know, the Earth was created before some of the starlight. It's stuff out there. We know stars were created before, you know, the Earth and stuff. I mean, we're retroactively putting a modern scientific lens on these texts here. That these original people would have, if we talked about cosmic microwave background radiation or the Big Bang or anything to the people who are writing these texts, they would look at us funny and say, no, that's not what we're talking about. There's no way. But anyway, I'll let you get your word in here, Aaron.
I agree with that point.
Yeah.
But but as far as like the Big Bang, like I would never say to you, like, the Bible describes the Big Bang. I have not said that, and I would not say that. But there is a verse in the Quran that says, did you not know that everything was once a joined entity and we expanded it? That sounds a lot like the Big Bang.
What?
But I'm not a Muslim, so I mean, that's really kind of not my business.
Well, you see what I mean, though? Because we could look at that, but that's what I'm saying. Like, someone who is Muslim would totally use that
as evidence.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably should. I mean, that seems to be like a really nice point of evidence if you're trying to say that humanity has encountered or has dealt with or has communicated with something beyond our dimension.
But that doesn't make you believe the Quran, though, does it?
This is interesting, yeah, because like if you and I are both willing to say, yeah, but that's probably not true, though.
Yeah, like you're able to agree with us that logic doesn't work.
Yeah.
For that book.
When did I say it doesn't work?
Well, you said,
well,
you're not a Muslim, right?
Well, you're not a Muslim, right?
You don't think the Quran is, you know, completely accurate,
I don't
right?
think it's like a great book, but I think that's an amazing piece of knowledge. Like when I look at information, I don't look at anything as off limits. I'm not going to be like, oh, that's invalid.
Yeah,
that's
right. But what I'm saying is, you're not Muslim.
Value, it's going to be in my world.
And I applaud you for that. That's a great thing to have. I'm so glad that you're able to look at other texts and be open to your ideas. But yeah, like Shane's saying, like that, you're not a Muslim.
Yeah.
For like a lot of, you know.
So why aren't you convinced that the Quran is the written word of God when it says the same kind of things? When it says, you know, things about science that turn out to be true later on. Why does that not make you a Muslim?
Because they had like 2 examples where Christianity has like 27.
I would argue the Quran has more.
Yeah, I've read more of the Bible than the Quran, so I can't really refute that.
From the ex-Muslim folks that I know and I've talked to you about this, I would say that there's way more stuff you could probably pull from the Quran. But that's a side debate, right? You know, like if we can recognize that using this method to come to conclusions as to something like I don't think it matters the amount. Like Nostradamus had some crazy stuff to say that people can retroactively put in.
What's worth noting. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Finish your point.
Yeah, you know, like we can definitely look at some Nostradamus' texts and through these translations and stuff. You know, obviously we can get different ideas through different translations and stuff as to what these means. But like, you know, we can come to kind of similar conclusions that if this guy predicted so many things right, then we have to say that the other stuff has got to be true. Right. You know, like that's not a valid way to go about things. You see what I'm saying?
I agree.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not willing to like die on a hill over like every verse in the Bible as far as like whether or not it's true or if it's a metaphor or simile or anything. But I do look at certain parts of the Bible and I say, oh, wow, they knew this, you know, 3,000 years before we figured it out. That's amazing. So and then I look at, you know, historical accounts from like the Mayans or the Egyptians or any of these numerous, you know, civilizations from around the world that says, yeah, people came from the sky and took our women and bred with them. And that's a global story. And then I see that in the Bible, you know, the fallen angels came from heaven and took their women and bred with them and made children. And I'm seeing all these different lines of evidence that all point back to the same situation.
So is the argument...
The important one that I have is that this universe used to not exist. And once you have that fact in your head, you are in the supernatural realm, because this is the natural world. It says the universe ever was and is the universe, but yet it used to not be here.
If you're using the story of the Aztecs,
beyond space and time, introduce the universe into existence.
If you're using the story of the Aztecs and you're telling about how they had this belief of what we would call Nephilim in the Christian, lore of it, right? Came and had sex with women on Earth, right? But you also acknowledge that like the other beliefs of the Aztecs are not true. Like how can you reconcile that?
One good idea.
Well, if they have,
but what I'm
like you just said, one.
So here's the thing, right? What if
the whole thing being?
But Aaron, what if the Bible has some good ideas, but it's bullshit?
That's not the case.
How do you know, Aaron?
Because I've made an evaluation that took a lot longer.
So you've
ever time you've spent on it.
Okay, so what it sounds like you're saying, so you've agreed that the Quran has made, scientific predictions and them turned out to be true, but the reason you're not convinced that, the reason you're not a Muslim is because the Bible has more of them. Am I not mistaken? So for you, it's that the Bible has the most of these scientific predictions, right?
That's not the entirety of the reason I'm a Christian.
Okay,
sure.
But so it's not the only reason. But let me ask you this. If you found another holy book, was a little bit older, had even more predictions that it got right, would that make you think that it was more likely to be true than the Bible is?
I would definitely take a look at it.
All right.
Yeah, that's good to know.
It would be a full body evaluation.
All right, well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's about all we can do with this call. We definitely want to get to some other calls.
Yeah.
But Aaron,
thank you
so much for calling. That was...
Guys, just remember my last point. The universe used to not be here. That means something beyond it made it. That's why they threw out the multiverse.
I'm going to throw a million asterisks at that statement there.
Of the universe.
But we unfortunately, we can't really talk about it too much anymore, because that one will be here all night. But also we do have some other callers that just want to get to and talk to. So I'm going to agree to disagree with you right now, Aaron. Next time, let's talk about the universe. All right? And maybe we can go into a little bit of that. But again, thank you.
This is Zach, by the way. I don't know why they kept calling me Aaron.
Oh, okay. They have Aaron here written on our call screen.
Yeah,
so
sorry about that, man.
Flat Earth dude, it's the same guy.
All right,
All
Zach.
right.
Well, we'll talk to you next time about it. So take care.
Have a good night, man.
Thanks again. So, that was interesting because...
It was so much like I feel like that identical conversation countless times. You know what I mean?
I feel like I have to. But here's what I thought it was cool, because I totally did not use street epistemology at all, and you did this time. I kind of just let you roll with it, and I played bad. I think it was a good cop, bad cop thing going on time. I'm usually good cop in most of my guests, but it's like I don't know what else can we say. It's like if you make a personal evaluation, then that's something else that you're using to come to the conclusion that's true, right?
My point of bringing up the question about whether a person could survive in the stomach of a whale wasn't necessarily that it sounds silly. Though when he asked, of course, I had to answer honestly. Mm-hmm. It does. Well, the reason why I say that is because we understand the natural explanation behind why that wouldn't happen. You would be dissolved by stomach acid if you were in the stomach of a whale, digested, whatever. So suffocated probably first. I don't know. Whatever would get you first. Well, you might drown on your way in.
Shane.
However it happens, the point that I'm making is we can see that wouldn't work, right?
But his response was, if God is real, then that could happen.
Exactly.
Right.
And I'm actually glad that he said that, because I feel like that kind of points out what my problem with theism is. Everything becomes not only possible, but more plausible.
I don't think, if we're looking at the scientific evidences, quote unquote, for God being real, the ones he specifically cited don't lead me to Christianity.
Right.
Really too much at all. Because, again, if we're looking at the scientific explanations for how even humans got here, right? Like, it's evolution. It's not creation.
Well, and then
the universe is a big bang. It's not a 6-day, 7-day ordeal.
And every argument from complexity is ultimately an argument from incredulity. Yeah. You're saying it's so complex, how else could it have happened?
Yeah.
So there's that. But also, the appearance of design doesn't prove design. I'm willing to agree that, there are a lot of living organisms that even in my own eyes have the appearance of being designed. But I understand the process of why that works.
And the design thing, that's interesting because intuitively that makes a lot of sense to us.
It does. Well, okay, so I always go with, when I was in Hawaii, I went to Volcano National Park, and I saw this thing about birds on the island, how their beaks evolved from one species into all these different beaks, right?
Yeah.
What you'll realize is the birds that eat nectar, for example, get a more long downward pointed kind of beak. The ones that eat seeds, they get more wide beaks that are better, like sharper, better for breaking open seeds. So you would look at these beaks, and if you didn't understand evolution, you would go, okay, look, this beak is designed for getting nectar. This beak is designed for getting seeds because it works out perfectly.
Yeah.
But what you learn when you start learning about evolution is that what happens is the birds that had the beaks best suited for getting the food that they're eating were the ones that were surviving the most and passing on those genes and, adapting more to it over time.
Specifically, he was talking about DNA. And
right.
About, we totally show that DNA changes all the time. So it's like if the DNA changes to a point where it's completely different from what it was before, how can we say that it's designed?
Right.
How can we say that the DNA we have now is any more designed than the DNA that we can observe changing in real time?
If you were to make the case that God was making evolution happen.
Yeah, and that's not what
if you were going there with it, which he didn't say that.
The
so
text
let's
doesn't.
not.
Yeah. Well, we should stop because we should give Zach a fair chance to respond to what we're saying, because otherwise, if we're just talking about it at the end here too,
we don't
it's not fair to the people.
I want to give a breakdown, but not.
And plus, we have other people who want to talk to us too, and
let's get to some.
So let's go to our next call here. We're going to talk to Matthew in New York. Hey, Matthew, how's it going?
What's going on, Matt?
Hi, Dan. Hi, Shane.
Hey. What's up?
Not much. It's just wanted to give you a little bit of a background. The topic that I wanted to talk about was how people misinterpret the gender wage gap, and I will caveat it. So basically, I wanted to talk about the gender wage gap.
Okay.
And just so you know, I became an atheist a couple of years ago, swung very hard right, and then back to center.
Okay.
And one of the things that I kind of haven't shaken is the concept that the gender wage gap is not stated accurately. And I kind of wanted to get your guys' opinions on it, because the way I see it is that once you control for opportunity, education, income, well, not income, opportunity, education, job, at that point, the gender wage gap shrinks to a point where you really can't tell. And I just wanted your thoughts about that.
Well,
when I look at my colleagues, a lot of the women, when you work in a corporate in New York, you really get paid the same amount when you start out.
Well,
and the rest is performance-based.
The claim isn't that in every single job, men are getting paid more than women, right? We have examples of specific fields where that is happening. And that tends to be the case more often than vice versa.
I was going to make the joke, wow, what a controversial and, really nuanced topic response here that I definitely want to give. Shane, why don't you go first?
Okay. Yeah. But... So, like I was saying, the claim isn't that in every single job, men are being paid more than women. I mean, where I work, I had most of my coworkers are male because I work overnight as a grocery stocker. But when I did have few female coworkers, they had the same starting wage that I had. One actually had a higher one because she had experience. So I don't happen to work for a company where the gender inequality as far as pay is concerned exists, right? But the fact that it doesn't exist in my company, or the company that I work for, not my company, doesn't prove that it isn't a thing in other companies, right? I think what people are saying is that this is a prevalent issue in a lot of fields.
Yeah, and I would be careful, Matthew, because if we're saying, obviously you're looking at your own workplace and you're saying, well, this doesn't apply here. That anecdotal evidence can trick us into, reframing the kind of claims that people are making and the conversation that's really happening. Because
absolutely.
Yeah, and I look at my own workplace and I kind of look at it the same way. But really, again, I think the claim is in specific fields we are looking at, and there's also a broader commentary on specifically like how it has been historically easier for men to get promotions and like ask for raises in the past because the work environment hasn't been as kind to women in those particular areas.
And there are also a lot of stigmas with women, like, people are going to assume they can't do the job as adequately just because, you have a lot of things like that interfere as well.
The specific study that people are citing here when they're talking about this, I've looked at it and I've seen other people's takes on it. I'm not an economist, and I can only tell you what other people have told me about it. But, to echo Shane's point, it's talking about specific context variables.
Right.
And it's not,
I can use that same, I could speak to the same point. I haven't had a job where that's been the case, but I do know someone who told me that in his office that he works at, I won't name the company, but all the men got started at like $17 an hour, and there was one woman who worked there, and she got started at like $12.50. And after a few months of her working there, everyone kind of talked about what they were getting paid, like it came up, and they realized that one or two women who started working there were getting paid significantly less, and everybody confronted the boss at the same time. And this usually isn't going to be the case where you have coworkers who are willing to do this, but they said they were all going to quit if they didn't even that out, and they did. So I think it's good to ask your coworkers about what, to what their starting pay, when it's appropriate, of course, not everybody. But I think that it's good to kind of establish between your coworkers who's getting paid what, so you can figure out whether or not there's any inequality in those areas. Because in that case, there was, right? But in my job, there isn't, and it sounds like in your job, there isn't. So
yeah, and there is something to be said. I also want to add as well that people point out, well, what if this is taking account of industries where there are more women that work in them, but they don't get paid as much as an industry as a whole, and whether or not that's actually true in regards to the specific study mentioned, that should raise some red flags,
right?
As far as why are the women the wages that women get paid specifically for these kinds of industries, the ones that we think of as more like female oriented, why do they get paid less than other ones? And sometimes it's a matter of economics and based on, well, it may be a more a cyclical industry that isn't the same as like transportation or something. Well, actually transportation is a cyclical industry. I'm more talking about like an exchange, not the raw goods or something, but maybe of something that is more affected seasonally and stuff like that. And again, this isn't an economics program. Clearly, I don't know.
Right. But I'm not an expert on economics like he was saying.
Yeah, it's something that
what I have heard when I looked into the gender pay gap is that it's not a matter of like overall male pay in the U.S. and overall female pay in the U.S. It's a matter of per specific job.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. So
yeah. But so there you go. That's our takes, Matthew.
Yeah.
So, can I challenge a couple of things?
Challenge us.
Love it.
And I agree with all of your points.
Okay.
I completely agree. And to be honest,
hard to challenge us if you agree with everything.
Yeah, but go on.
Well, go on.
Is there not a provision in the legal system that prevents gender pay discrimination?
Yes, but legal protections don't always pan out. Right. So I can tell you about something. I won't go into details, but I can tell you some things about my job where people have done some things. It might, that definitely weren't super legally permissible at times, and yet things just happen.
You also have to consider this, Matthew.
Yeah.
If I'm a manager at the company that I work for, and I have if I have one male employee or one male applicant and one female applicant, and the female applicant is more qualified for the job, but I don't choose her just because she's female, there's no evidence that that's why I did it. You only have evidence that I hired the male, and you don't have evidence of why I didn't hire the female.
Yeah, legal.
You don't have there's no way to prove it.
Right.
And it's the same thing with racial discrimination.
Yes.
If somebody isn't hiring people because of their ethnicity, you can't really prove it until the person actually says it. If somebody's just,
Yeah. So and that's the thing, where the legal recourse there, even in these instances, are sometimes so small. It's almost not worth challenging, right? So
Right.
even if we're talking about like wage laws, for example, if you're not getting paid for one day, right? They missed something, but they're not going to pay you for it. Okay, well, what are your options there?
Yeah,
are you
it could just get so hard. You're going to go to court.
Yeah, you have
everything over.
You have to go to court. You have to spend time and money. You have to fight a case on this, and at that point, it's not worth it. So yeah, people can get away with these things in small ways, and I have seen studies that show that every year that there are corporations who steal wages and the wage theft is a thing from some of the stuff. And that's one example, right? And that's not to say it doesn't go both ways in some cases, right? Like that employees don't take something from the company. But as a corporation, there's responsibilities there that...
Right. The short answer to your question, even though we already gave a long one,
right.
The short answer would be, there are laws, but making something a law doesn't make it happen.
Yep.
People break laws.
Just because it's illegal to be racist to the people that you're,
right.
To discriminate doesn't mean that racism still
happens.
Right? Doesn't mean that discrimination.
It being illegal helps.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it not happen.
Yeah.
People break laws.
It's true. So there you go. What do you think, Matthew?
I agree with that. Second point of that I wanted to kind of talk to about that is, could it be possible that people are misinterpreting a difference in, I hope you remember I mentioned a couple of caveats at the beginning that once you control for a number of things, could it be possible that people are misinterpreting something like, say, for example, a value that's ascribed to quote-unquote traditional masculine characteristics as favorable in a business environment?
Right. So
yeah,
I almost interrupted you, and I'm glad that I didn't. As soon as I heard you say, is it possible that people are misinterpreting, I almost cut you off and said yes. Because it's possible to misinterpret anything, right?
Right. So do you know about any studies or any maybe data that I can look into that will possibly help clear up this thing?
I would recommend
maybe getting rid of some of the confounding factors.
I would recommend looking at a census bureau. That's not going to be your only source, but I would recommend starting there.
In the case
I'm a little bit bigger. We're more into the supernatural claims and stuff like that.
Here's what I'll say about this.
But with this, that's what I can get.
In the case of economic data, your best bet is probably going to be government sources, right? Because journals, there are bad journals out there for science. In economics, it's worse. There are lots of economic journals that get published out there that are totally fronts that lobbyists pay for to promote think tanks, and there's these agendas that happen. And unless you have a lot of background on the idea of some of these different sources, it becomes harder and harder. But government sources are probably going to be your best bet when looking at this, and then secondary sources might be. Look at what major publications that you respect are quoting from and looking at. Look at the Wall Street Journal, look at the Economist. Major news publications. While there's a lot of people that don't trust the media, there's a reason why they have been established the way that they are is because that they're reporting. 90% of the time they're going to be using more than 90%, but they're using legitimate sources because they know that there is an accountability,
and they know people are fact checking them.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
they know that there are people that disagree with them, waiting for them to get something wrong.
Yeah, and smarter people than us have definitely talked about this issue at length in both of those places. So that's where I would suggest to look.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the reason why I'm a little bit hesitant to look at just raw data is because I've seen people, play with data a little bit to kind of make it say what they want it to say.
Yes.
I'm just a little bit I'm a little skeptical if you...
Right, people can totally misuse statistics to make their point.
Especially people talk about the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers have all kinds of stuff that they're paying for as well to promote certain... publishing certain materials to promote a free market, kind of ideology and stuff like that. That stuff's definitely out there,
Yeah.
and it's something you should definitely be
Well,
worried
I'm going to
about.
have to steal a joke from Bill Burr, so I don't want to take credit for this, but he kind of talked about statistics aren't the problem, it's the way people use them. Like he said somebody told him, someone was asking him to go snorkeling, and he was like, I'm not going in the ocean. That's where the sharks,
Yeah.
I'm going to get bit by a shark. And someone was like, oh, well, 90% of shark attacks happen in shallow water. It's like, no shit, that's where all the people are. That's why the shark attacks are happening there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's true. Well, Matthew, I hope we answered a lot of your questions and challenges there. I do want to get to our next caller here, but thanks again for calling in.
It's been a great conversation. Thank you, man.
Thank you guys. It always helps to bounce these things off of people.
Yeah, totally. And we could be wrong too.
I'm glad I got a few more points.
So if anybody, if I said something that isn't accurate, let me know in the comments. And if you have sources, that would be appreciated.
Shane's right. He could be wrong.
No.
So make sure that you don't.
Yeah, I'm
fact check Shane.
Do fact check me. If you wanna, Matthew, go back and listen to our conversation. Anything that I get wrong, let me know for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next caller. Thanks again, Matthew, for calling in. And I hope to hear from you again, pretty soon. See what you find on that kind of stuff. But it is interesting when people kind of bring in other kinds of stuff that I'm not fully prepared to answer.
Yeah. And, neither of us are very into, like, economics or any of that. But I think it's easy to give the basic moral arguments for why, we should have gender equality.
Sure.
But then we also have to discover how we would go about figuring out if someone was getting paid wrong. And it's why I brought up the point of, like, we can't prove that an employer isn't hiring you because of your gender or because of your ethnicity.
It becomes harder to prove and harder to report on.
Right.
That kind of stuff. But, I looked into this issue years and years ago. There was this was years ago now, but, like, I was almost kind of on an anti-feminist bent a little bit before I came to the place where I am now.
Well, there are extremists in any ideology. I would honestly consider myself a feminist myself. I'm compatible with the definition, but I will say that I've had a lot of conversations with feminists that are extremists that make me think, okay, I'm not whatever this is.
Right.
So I guess that's what people tend to call third wave or whatever.
But more to the point with my story is like when I was looking more into this, I kind of ended up turning around. And I realized how much of my biases were playing into that. Some of those biases, by the way, being introduced from Christianity. As far as my views on like men and women and stuff. Because I definitely was not as accepting as like of LGBT people, and that's specifically was because of a religious value that I held there. But I'm glad that I'm here now. And I've changed my mind on all that stuff, and I can talk to other people about it and see why people think that or don't think that. But let's go ahead and go to our last call tonight. I think we're gonna go to Glenn in Pennsylvania. Hey, Glenn, how's it going?
Hey, how you doing?
Doing
not so bad. How are you?
Not so bad. Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Thank you. Good. Tonight I wanted to talk about the double slit experiment. I had heard an earlier caller speak about how that proved God. I believe that the double slit experiment proves that there's no such thing as an all-seeing God, because what happens is the results change based on observation, and that means that God is not observing.
Okay. Well, I might actually have to disagree with you and that last caller. I don't think this experiment proves or disproves the existence of a God. And to be fair, I
didn't say a God, though. I said an all-seeing God.
Oh, an all-seeing God. Okay, that's more specific. That makes more sense. That's more justified. Okay. What would your take on that be?
Well, so when people were talking about the double slit experiment, they're talking about different depending on your observation, your point of view, you're getting different things. And it's like that's not quite what that.
Can we briefly,
says.
What is the double slit experiment? Because I'm unfamiliar with it. So, I don't want to pretend I know about it.
Maybe Glenn, are you an expert on the double slit experiment? Do you want to give a take?
Could you teach me?
Yeah.
Yeah, not an expert, but I've watched a lot of videos on it. It's very interesting. It's so hard to understand. The only thing it does prove is what I'm suggesting, in my opinion. But what it is they shoot a particle or an electron through a double slit, and it will form a wave pattern on a screen behind the double slit if you don't observe it. But if you observe it, and observing could be a person, it could be a camera, if you actually observe it, you could see the individual particle form a particle pattern. So the patterns that it will form will change based on observation. It's the most interesting thing about quantum physics that people just don't explain.
Here's the other thing
I think it proves is the all-seeing God.
Here's the thing that people don't point out with the double slit experiment is that in the act of observation, things are still happening on a physical level that we don't always think about. Photons are still bouncing off of this thing so that we could see it with our eyes, or that our machines are still detecting stuff. There's still there's physics that happen in the actual action of observation. And that's what drives me crazy because I don't because obviously there's a lot of quantum woo out there of people saying like, I saw in that book today that I was talking about earlier, there was some stuff about quantum physics in there. By the way, did you know there's a quantum university in Honolulu, Hawaii? Isn't that crazy? Quantum university. I want to be a Quantum U alumni. Do you think if I asked if they could make me like an honorary thing, I could say I'm from Quantum U because that sounds cool. Do you think like they're, I don't know, I could talk about this all day. Like their mascots are like the neutrinos or something?
That would be awesome.
I don't know. That'd be cool. Anyway, side note. So yeah, like people just misinterpret this thing all over the place. And Glenn, you're right to point out that like there's so many different, there's as many interpretations to the double slit experiment as there are to, the act of observing the particles, right? It's not clear, and certainly the people like us who don't have a relevant degree in the field of talking about shouldn't be even talking about it as well. But the fact that so many other people are talking about it, right, is something that we have to bring up and have to carefully scrutinize.
Yeah, I don't have anything past a high school diploma, so I can't be teaching people about quantum mechanics and stuff. But
well, I don't. Even the experts don't understand it. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's certainly not fully realized, and there's different interpretations on how to look at the data there. But like, does it prove that there's a God, or certainly as you point out, it can't be an all-seeing God if it's two different states, right? Was that kind of the argument you were going to go there, or?
Yeah, that was my comment, though. I just believe it proves that there's not an all-seeing God, because I have heard the all-seeing God used before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, people will talk about that, and they'll talk about superposition and stuff, and particles being able to speak to each other at different places, use quantum mechanics to explain healing in the body and consciousness and just all kinds of just nonsense that doesn't really.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is you can confidently rule out a specific divine attribute, which I would agree with. So, I don't think we're in disagreement here.
That's the main comment.
Yeah,
that's the main comment I was making too. And the other thing you just touched on was spooky action at a distance.
Yeah, spooky action at a distance.
Very fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I'll let it. I'll say it once and I'll say it again. The people who study these things are not saying the things that other people are saying about it. You know what I mean?
And it's easy to misquote them.
They don't know.
Right.
They don't know. Nobody has a solution. Even the smartest people would like a solution. If you could ask somebody the question that could give you an answer, you'd be in really good shape.
Yeah, for sure. But again, I want to leave it to the, I'll talk about science all day, but at the end of the day, I'm going to, let the experts have their say because I can't write a book about this stuff. I can't. At best, I can do a research paper, but it's not the same thing. So anyway, Glenn, glad you got to call.
Yeah, thank you.
And point that out.
Okay.
And bring us some sanity into this world. I'll let you go now. Thanks again for calling in. And on that note, I think we should wrap it up here.
All right.
Show tonight. Again, we're going to be talking on Discord in just a bit. So those of you who are watching live, come stick around. And Shane is here to answer any questions. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
Glad. Hopefully we can do it again. And I got to get you on Atheist Vanguard sometime.
Yeah, we'll make it happen for sure. I'd be interested in doing that. So remember, folks, next week is the last episode of Truth Wanted for the year. It's going to be Friday the 13th with Jamie Boone as my guest.
Who's that?
Yeah. Of course, you've seen him on Talk Heathen, of course.
I have no idea who Jamie Boone is.
And it's going to be really cool. So please join us. And please, guys, again, I would love it if we could get Truth Wanted to 10,000 subscribers before the end
that would be awesome.
Of the year. That would be super, super cool. And I just want to give a big shout out to everyone who helps make this show. And they are super awesome, too. Let's get a quick look at the back
That's our
here.
awesome
That's the crew.
Awesome.
Who volunteer their time every single week to help make this show happen. Thank you, crew.
Great people.
For helping out.
Love
and
them.
If you want to support this show and other shows like it, you can donate on patreon.com/truthwanted. All the money to the Patreon. It helps let us know, like, hey, people like Truth Wanted, but also it goes to the atheist community of Austin.
Yeah.
And so I don't get paid for it. Our volunteers don't get paid for it.
If I'm not mistaken, they can get it as a write-off on their taxes,
Yes,
right?
you can get a write-off on your taxes for donating as well. And so it all goes to the organization helping make shows like this possible.
Yes.
So please be sure to check that out. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And you can also find this show on Spotify, iTunes, wherever else you get your podcasts from. If you want to contact me, you can do it at truth@atheist-community.org. And I'm on Twitter a lot. It's @ObjectivelyDan. So please send me a message on there. I want to give a quick shout out to Derek. If you guys remember, Derek had called a few weeks ago saying he wanted to use some clips of the show.
I heard that.
For a college presentation, and he actually did it. And he told me, he said it went over well.
That's awesome, man.
So I have officially been used in a higher education institution.
Good for you.
And I don't know how I feel about that.
I would be proud of it.
I would say, wow, okay, I'm glad you think I'm worthy of that. So
I would definitely be proud of it.
Yeah, I do appreciate it, Derek. Thanks again. So Shane, where can people find you at if they want
People can find me if you go to Atheist Vanguard and you write something in the comments. I can't say I read every one of them, but I probably read upward of 80% of the comments. So go leave me something. I'll definitely be checking out the comments on this episode as well. So, I try to respond to what I can. So please, let me know if I got something wrong. That's my favorite thing to hear about, So
there you go. Yeah.
Anything.
Tell me if I'm wrong too. I'm probably wrong about some stuff today. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that I wish we had more time to cover in the specific stuff, especially stuff with the science and stuff we're talking about. But, there's always going to be more episodes for that. So look forward to those conversations. And thanks again to all of you who watched this show live as well. You guys are amazing. And I'm looking forward to another great episode next week.
Don't forget to check out Atheist Vanguard.
Yeah, check out Atheist Vanguard. They're pretty cool. But until next time, folks, always keep wanting the truth. And I'll see you then.
All right.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.